Hey everybody, Swaddy Krab. Welcome to Beer Time Stories, a platform where beer and brewing knowledge is shared. So for today's session, we're gonna have a good burp about English ale and its charismatic test. But I'm not here alone to talk about it. I have a man who shares the same or even more passion about this particular styles of beer as I do. He is the legendary home brewer, the voice behind Brew Strong show of the Brewing Network Live Beer Radio. He's also a former owner of Heretic Brewing Company, and now he's guiding younglings with his experience as a brewery consultant. Please welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Jamil Sainashev.
Hi, thanks for
Hello,
having me.
Jamil. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, how have you been? It's been a while, since our last meet.
I've been doing well. Been, doing some traveling and working on some books.
Right, right. Is it about yeast for the book?
Uh,
Or, I
I'm,
mean,
I'm
if, it,
doing
if it's confidential, then that's fine.
I'm doing one right now with a friend of mine in England,
Oh,
a brewer in England, Andy Parker from Elusive Brewing, and we're writing a book on modern home brewing. So we've been working on that. So it covers yeast, it covers just about everything, and kind
right.
of the best modern techniques for brewing to improve your beer. So I've been doing that, and then I've got a couple other ones that I'm working on, and some magazine articles. I just wrote a nice article for Brew Your Own that
Mhm.
covers alt beers, the Sticke and Latzenbier
Oh,
beers of Dusseldorf. Tells you how to make them. Kind of goes through the whole thing.
that's wonderful. I mean, it sounds delicious as well.
It's delicious work if you can get it. Yes,
Yeah, I
writing
bet.
about these beers.
True, true. So, say that it's been probably 2 years that we met, but you seems to be doesn't change at all, or even look younger. Is there any secret to that?
Lots of
Is that
good
the
beer.
right? It's like the one you are sampling right now.
Yeah, right now I'm having a strong Suffolk, which is a Green King beer. Um,
Mhm.
it's a special
Oh,
beer that they make. They age it in oak barrels. So it's a strong ale aged in oak barrels.
right,
And it's
right.
quite tasty.
So I bet it's kind of an elixir of life.
It's delicious. British ales are probably my favorite. I think you know uh,
Yeah,
probably the some of the hardest beers really to reproduce elsewhere in the world.
true. I would agree. So yeah, so like the one in your glass, I would say that English ale is considered to be one of the great drinks. So I'd like to cut the ribbon by asking you this question: like, can you describe us like what even is an English ale in a nutshell?
Yeah, it's a complex question.
Mhm.
In its most basic, an English ale is any ale brewed in England. But I think we're talking more about the classic British ales, and
Right.
really, what you have there is, um, tremendous malt character, tremendous fermentation character, and in some instances, tremendous hop character. So it could be it could be any or all of those things, and often in a smaller ABV package. So not a lot of alcohol, but you're getting this huge malt character that really only comes from some of these great British malts. You get this incredible fermentation character, lots of fruity esters, and different alcohol notes, floral and fruity, and warming, and just all sorts of different fermentation characters. And then you can also get some unique hops that are grown in England, that are real classic as well. So Really, tremendous flavors in a small package a lot of times.
Yeah, so it seems like we are not speaking about one particular style of beer. It is kind of broad range, like array of beer that is brewed in
Right.
UK. So we can
You-
expect like, yeah, please go ahead.
yeah, you can have anything from an ordinary bitter or a golden ale that's 2.8,
Right.
3%, that's malty and smooth, up to you can have IPAs with quite hoppy. You can have
Like
you can
barley
have
wine as well.
barley wine, as well. You know, uh, uh, with higher alcohol and again malty flavors or even hoppy. You can have beers with a funky character to them.
Hmm.
And maybe even some souring, like certain old ales, like
Right.
Gale's Prize Old Ale.
Hmm.
You can have just this intense, rich maltiness. Something like Theakston's Old Peculiar. That's one of my all-time favorites.
It's great.
Just rich and intense in the maltiness, but still easy to drink. And all around between 5 and 6% ABV. So spans a wealth of things from the intensely bitter, like Holden's bitter,
Mhm.
just cracking bitterness with great malt character, but just so easy to drink. Um, and then you can have something intensely malty, like a Theakston Old Peculiar.
Right. That's awesome. It seems like the British folks generates various style of beer from their island.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, and it's all sounds delicious. So before we go to the next step down this road, I probably have to ask you one question that you may have to search in your memory a little bit, and that it is about. I wonder, do you remember the first moment or scenario where this English ale kind of captured your attention or kind of impressed you? Like, can you share such a story?
Wow, that's tough. I really haven't thought about that. Um, like most home brewers or even beer drinkers in the U.S., I was introduced to it through a little bottled product that came over. I remember a friend in college, he used to every year have a party where you had to bring a 6 pack of beer
Mhm.
that was something, unique, that wasn't just your everyday beer.
Right.
And you'd go, and then you could just pick through when you're there at the party and tried a bunch of different beers. And that was probably my first introduction to a lot of the British beers there. And then as a home brewer, I try to buy every British beer I could. And I think the first thing was a friend of mine, Dave Teckham. He had a vertical tasting of, um, gosh, what was it? J.W. Lee's, or it was, gosh, I'm drawing a blank now. But a
Sorry.
vertical tasting of these beers
Right.
that like a 20-year span of stuff that he had stored underneath his house.
Oh,
And just the complexity of the flavors over that time. But I'd have to say, really, going to England and having beers there in person. I'll say this isn't England, but it is the UK at the time was, I guess still is. I was in Edinburgh,
right.
and um, I went to a pub there, and they had Old Peculiar
Mhm.
on cask, and it was just the most incredible thing. It was in perfect condition, and there are a couple of guys I ended up hanging out with, a couple of locals, and it
Right.
was fantastic. That just, for me, that really sealed my whole love of British pub culture and, you know, the the quality of the beers.
Right. So it's like the way that the pub itself, the beer in the glass, the environment of the people, that's kind of spark your liking to this particular like array of style of beer, right?
Right. Just the richness of flavor.
Hmm.
You just don't find that in a lot of other. You certainly don't find it in most American beers.
Hmm.
You don't find that complexity in a lot of German beers. You can find it in some Belgian beers, but I think Belgian beers are just a lot easier to make than the British beers are. People think that's crazy, but um, to truly replicate some of these British ales, you have to be doing open fermentation. You have to have the right ingredients. You have the right, a lot of the British ales are brewed with mixed cultures where there's,
Hmm.
multiple yeasts there that have been in use for, 100 years, 70 years, whatever. And so you can't just, buy a pack of dry yeast and put it in a closed fermenter and expect to get the same results. Just not going to happen.
Yeah, I would agree on that, and those things that you mentioned is going to be some of the topic that we touched down the road a bit more in detail. Awesome. So speaking about traveling to UK, I would want to experience one too. So it's definitely on my bucket list of the things to do, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe by the time before it happened, I'm probably going to have to ask for your advice for several places that shouldn't be missed out later.
Well, maybe one of these times I can tell you when I'm going to be in England, and you can come and
Oh,
join me.
well, that's beyond
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Because I mean, you're going to be back in the U.S. again, and you haven't been to England once. Come on, you got to go to England.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it will happen. It will happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're gonna go back to the the main road, the main topic. We know what is kind of English ale is in the brief definition, and you touched on it a little bit. But now I would like to speak a little bit about how does it actually distinguish from other type of ales. So we can go to the key contributor first, maybe like ingredients. Then we're gonna jump to the process. Can you
Hmm.
talk us through that?
Well, the main ingredient differentiator is British malts.
Mhm.
I always say if you want to make a British beer, you've got to have British malts, and the quality and the character of those malts, they're really unique. There's a number of U.S. maltsters or other maltsters around the world that try to make comparable malts to some of the British malts, and you'll see a lot of recipes that will say, yeah, you could use here's your. A lot of times people think, well, this British malt is right around 40 Lovibond crystal. I'll just use a 40 Lovibond crystal from the U.S. or from Australia or from wherever, and it's not the same. It does not have that depth of flavor, that richness, that intensity that you get from these British malts.
Mhm.
And it's not that the maltsters in other places in the world aren't smart and know what they're doing. It's just they've been doing it so long in England, and the source of the grain that they use there in England, and just the way that they process these through,
Mhm.
it's just a beautiful thing. It really makes a huge difference. So when I'm trying to brew a British ale, I need to use Simpsons, a Crisp, a Baird, a Fawcett's,
Yeah.
one of these maltsters that produce just these wonderful malts in the UK. And even in one of the things when I do uh, collaboration brew over in the UK, and they want to make something that's very California, I have to, tell them, we need to find the least flavorful malt, and so we use something. Simpsons has a malt called Extra Pale, which
Right.
is, really light in color and doesn't have quite the, it doesn't have as much intensity of flavor as their other malts. It still tastes great, but it's closer to what we use in California. And so we're looking for special malts to not have so much flavor, because everything else is just so rich. Even in their base malts, you can make a great beer using something like the Simpsons Golden Promise or something like that, or floor malted Thomas Fawcett's Maris Otter or something. Has a huge amount of flavor to it. So, that's just the malts. And then, of course, they make every range of malt there, from, the pale, the crystals, the chocolate malts, the roasted barleys, the black patent, that's all, British as well. And then, you take that, you make your work with it. The hops, they grow a lot of hops, there in England. It's not as massive a hop producing area as something like, the northwest of the United States, or, but
right.
They have an area mainly in the south of England that, they grow some very unique hops there as well. And again, when I was trying to homebrew a lot of these British ales, if you didn't get true Kent Goldings, they just did not taste right. They if it's grown somewhere else, it doesn't have the same flavor. They talk about terroir in grapes and things like that. It's also true in hops. Where it's grown, the sun, the wind, the rain, the soil, the nutrients in the soil, the farmer, all those things make a difference. And so those hops are unique as well. And then the yeast. So there's been a lot of brewing in England for a long time. And, a lot of the yeasts were, once people understood what yeast was, they started, passing it around and sharing it. And, it's very common for brewers, to just keep reusing the yeast. And they just, if something happened, they would get a new pitch of yeast from another brewer. So there's a lot of history there amongst the yeast cultures. And, one of my favorite breweries there is Harvey's in Lewis. And, their current pitch of yeast they got from, I want to say John Smith. I don't want to get it wrong. I think from John Smith back in the 1950s.
Wow.
And so they've been using that same culture for, 70 plus years.
Oh my God.
Most breweries, if they use a culture for, a couple of months, they're concerned.
10 generations, they just go with the new pitch of yeast, right?
Right. So I think they told me that there was something like 11 or 13 organisms in their culture when they had it plated out, and so they have this culture banked now, and so they can start it up again if something should happen. But it produces a very unique character to that beer. It doesn't taste funky or anything, but it's you can tell it's got more going on. There's just no way to replicate it without having access to all those organisms and having the pitch like that. I was at Adnams, and at Adnams they have two strains in their beer, and one of them produces a little bit of phenolics, like a kind of a little bit of a peppery kind of note to it. And one of them is very dusty, which I assume is the one that produces the peppery notes to it. And
Mhm.
the other one is much more flocculent.
All right.
And so they need to use them together. If they don't pitch the flocculent one, the dusty one won't have clear beer. And so they need both working together almost symbiotically. Sure, they could have just said, hey, let's just pick a new yeast and go with something that isn't so much work. But Adams was concerned that the flavor and character of their beer would change, and they want the same flavor and character of their beer that has been going on for generations. They want that same thing to be going forward for more generations. It's just like Harvey's. They put a lot of effort into these yeasts. People talk about, Belgian yeasts are, I nothing against Belgian beers, and I love them, and they are wonderful. But people talk about how complex, the Belgian, beers are in fermentation, and a lot of them are just, you can replicate it with a clean, single organism pitch of, these yeasts. Whereas in England, you can't. You truly need multiple organisms in order to develop these tremendous flavors of fermentation.
Right. So it seems that this is one of the key distinguisher for the flavor development from fermentations for certain English style of ales that's come from multicultures that kind of layer depth of flavor in the final beer. And so this is one of the interesting point, because for mostly of the modern breweries, they're going to use a single PO strain of yeast, right? And to maintain this multicultural yeast is kind of challenging. Like I've seen the the video from Harvey's that they kind of have the bank vessel for their yeast, and they just use the sanitized bucket to just scoop it down from the lower cellar up and then pitch into their fermenters, which is pretty interesting to see. And they still produce one of the world-class English ale out there, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
True. So if you're going to talk a little bit about yeast, I understand that most of English ale strain is a leading chart in terms of ester producer. Is that right?
Yeah, you'll get most English ale strains will produce a fair amount of esters, so more fruity, more floral esters. The thing about it is, it will only produce it under the correct conditions. So, if you take, and again, for example, I was working on this article about Dusseldorf alt beers, and in Dusseldorf they also do open fermentation. So they're fermented, quite warm and open fermentation. And if you don't open ferment, you won't get quite the flavor. So when I was doing my recipe development and testing out these recipes, I used White Labs, I think WOP 036, their Dusseldorf alt yeast. And I had used it many times before, but got quite a clean fermentation from them. And it was too clean for what really goes on in Dusseldorf and what it really tastes like. So I did an open fermentation using the same yeast, and I got, vastly different results. The CO2 that is in solution and captured above the beer while it's fermenting increases CO2 concentration. And by increasing CO2 concentration, it suppresses the development of these esters. So by removing that, you get considerably more character and flavor. So same yeast that I'd used many times before, but I had never open fermented with it. So by doing open fermentation, it really changed the character of the beer.
Right. So it seems like not just about the process, but the equipment as well that gonna contribute to the differentiation in the final flavor of the beer itself. Given
Right.
the example that you share, so yeah, we mentioned several times about open top fermentations. So I'm gonna pull up one photo of the Yorkshire Square and probably gonna ask you to help explain a little bit like what does this type of fermentation do, probably
Mhm.
like in just a quick detail. Just a moment.
Sure. Yeah, open square fermentation really, one of the big things about it is, there's no top on the fermenter. There's no
Hmm.
cover on it, no lid. If you're brewing at home, you'll have a bucket maybe with a lid on it, or you'll have your own a glass carboy or something like that, or a plastic carboy that's closed with a stopper, or you'll have a conical fermenter, and even big commercial brewers will have conical fermenters.
Hmm.
And while there's no pressure on top of it, um, it's a sealed top which holds CO2 in the fermenter. And
Hmm.
that blanket of pure CO2 above the fermenter increases the dissolved CO2 in solution. That dissolved
Hmm.
CO2, like I mentioned before, will
Right.
suppress yeast's ability to produce these esters. So
Right.
what you're looking at here is these square fermenters.
Right.
And they can be square, sometimes they're round, sometimes they're rectangular.
Hmm.
They tend to be not too deep.
Right.
So the deepest I've seen is perhaps 2 meters,
Hmm.
and usually less than that.
Right.
The shallower it is, again, more easily the CO2 can come out of
Hmm.
solution. This open fermenter, you see the yeast is on top.
Right.
It looks like they are recirculating the
Hmm.
wort. They're pumping it around,
Right.
and what that does is introduce more oxygen
Hmm.
into the beer, and what that does is uh, it feeds the yeast, so the yeast can attenuate better. A lot of the British yeasts don't attenuate that well. It also
Right.
can help them develop some of these estery flavors. Um, the the square corners on
Hmm.
the fermenter, also the beer does not circulate as well there, and the yeast does not circulate as well there. It
Right.
causes what they call dead corners.
Hmm.
Uh, which you don't have in a cylindrical vessel.
Right.
There's no square corners, and they tend
Right.
to circulate well. Well, that lack of mixing of the beer in with the rest of the active fermentation results in a higher diacetyl level in the finished
Oh.
beer. So that is one thing that also can happen. So they've measured higher diacetyl in square fermenters with corners like that.
Right.
Um, so they will pitch the yeast, all the wort in the yeast in these big fermenters. You can see
Hmm.
there's drains around the floor for when the one in the back there has spilled over from
Right.
fermentation. In Germany, when they're doing open fermentation at the Schlussel breweries in Schlussel, they had a fermenter designed with a lip that
Hmm.
they always fill it to the same point every time, and
Hmm.
then the top of the yeast spills over, taking with it any of the brown or black bits of
The
the
Croissant
burnt
just
the burnt
overflow, right?
yeast or the Braunhof.
Hmm.
They take that off because getting that back into it's also some of the resin compounds from the hops going
Hmm.
back into the beer results in a less smooth beer.
Hmm.
But the British do it. You can either manually skim the top of these fermenters to remove that material,
Hmm.
or some of the fermenters are designed with what's called a parachute,
Parachute.
and it's essentially a cone like a funnel,
Hmm.
that is attached to a pipe.
Right.
And then the height of this is adjustable with a crank, and they can crank it up or down, and they will lower it a little bit into where it skims the top surface of the yeast and gets rid of the burnt bits, the
Right.
dead yeast and hop resins and all that.
Mhm.
They throw that to the drain. Then they lower it a little bit further down, and then they drain off lots of nice yeast to crop the yeast into a container to use in future beers. So that's called a parachute.
Parachute.
Yeah, in Germany, in Dusseldorf, I saw them. They just use a large, which looked like a spatula with holes in it. A large one. The
Right.
size of your torso, and they would, just scoop the yeast off the top of the beer, let the beer run out through the holes in the spatula, and then throw that in a bucket, and that's what they would use for their next pitches. But again, the critical thing to know about this is it's not that deep, and it's open on top, so there's no CO2 being trapped over the fermentation. So CO2 concentrations are lower in the beer, and that's what helps develop those tremendous flavors of British ales.
Right. So seems like not only the practice of open fermentation, but also the geometry of the vessel itself gonna have the certain bits to play with the flavor of the beer.
Right.
Again, right?
Right.
Yeah, sounds interesting. And the way to recirculate the fermenting beer is to resuspend the yeast and also introduce oxygen to the
Yes.
you know
Absolutely.
as
And
well.
one of the ways they used to do this in the past, they don't pump it around continuously, but the way they used to do this in the past is a system called double drop, and they would have a fermenter up above, because a lot of the breweries were all gravity driven back then. The tower breweries,
Right.
they would have a fermenter above the square. Even Fuller's had this up until I think sometime in the 80s, something like that, I want to say.
Right.
They had a fermenter above, and that the beer gets pumped into there or dropped into there from the kettle, and yeast gets pitched. And then after a certain amount of time, generally I think it was 18 hours or 24 hours, whatever it was, once things started going, they would drop the beer through a sintered pipe, sintered being lots of little holes in it, pipe, and down into the fermenter below, and the sintered pipe would draw in air as the liquid passed by. So it added a lot of oxygen to it. It allowed them to leave behind a lot of the bits that they didn't want. Again, the skimming of that surface, that's a common theme you'll see in a lot of these brewers, these older brewers. And then so it oxygenated it, it resuspended the yeast, as you were saying,
Right.
and also removed some of the bits that they didn't want.
So this particular system, the system that you mentioned, is this the same with the Burton Union, or is different?
Burton Unions is different, and with a Burton Union, that was a series of barrels that, as the beer would bubble up, it would go up onto a deck above it, and the beer would drip back down into the barrels, and then it would leave behind a lot of the bits that they didn't want.
Right.
So again,
so it's the kind of one in this photo, right?
Yes, that's a Burton Union. So the last one in operation, I think, was at Marston's, and I think Carlsberg bought them, and they're closing it down, which is a shame. It's
Oh yeah.
If I could buy it, I'd buy it. I'd put it into use. I told John Keeling back in the day, I said, look, Fuller's has a lot of equipment that from the past that they're not using. It was all stored in warehouses on the property there. I said, just give me some of this equipment. We'll put it in a shipping container. We'll send it over to California. I said, I'll
Right.
set it up in a warehouse there, and I will brew using that old equipment, using some of the old recipes from the Fuller's, logs. They have logs going back hundreds of years. And, we'll make, beer from, 100 years ago
Right.
in California.
Right.
And he was all
Resurrected.
excited about it, but
I do ask as well. Just hearing this story, it's going to be awesome. I mean,
yeah, I wonder if I could buy some gear from somebody.
Yeah. So for the Burton Union, it is popularized in Burton in UK, and I think that the way that they apply this fermentation system is also pain during the cleaning process as well. But it's gonna contribute to their what the flavor profile that they are aiming after.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it is one of the pretty interesting system.
Yeah, fermenter geometry, the equipment used for fermentation makes a difference in the flavor of the finished beer. If you ferment something in a really tall, cylinder conical tank, it's going to change the flavor of the beer. It's going to suppress that ester production. It's going to make for a cleaner tasting beer because the CO2 saturation is going to be higher. Hydrostatic pressure and all that. If you were to do if you fermented in a very shallow, wide, dish that was, a couple of centimeters deep,
right?
And then you took this exact same wort and exact same yeast, and you fermented it in a tube that was a couple of centimeters wide, but very tall,
right?
There'd be two absolutely different beers.
Right.
You would have no trouble telling the difference between those two beers because the yeast is going to behave in a completely different manner given those two conditions.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the topics that home brewer or brewer might neglect the effect of the geometry of fermenter. Yeah,
absolutely.
So, yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, so we know the kind of the process and the ingredients that kind of position English ale from the other type of ales around. And I want to sidetrack the story here a little bit because, throughout this conversation, you've mentioned Fuller's for, several times. And I wonder, if I remember correctly, there was a point in time that you were in Fuller's and you became their brewers for, maybe like an hour or two. Like, can you just touch on the story a little bit? Like, what's going on there?
I did. It's perhaps one of the greatest collaboration brews I've ever done because my dear friend Henry Kirk, he's now opened his own brewery called Sunken Knave in Worthing, UK, focused on things like brewing great old ales and things like that. He and I were doing a blackberry goza
at Fuller's.
Beer at Fuller's, a sour beer at Fuller's, which everybody was kind of freaked out about, but everybody was real excited to see it. John Keeling, especially, but because it was a goza, it took multiple days to make the wort because you have to make the wort first. You have to chill it down, then you have to pitch your bacteria, and then you have to wait 24 hours for the next day. So I was there quite a bit, and Henry got to know me and started to trust me because it seemed like I knew what I was doing. And I had done some commercial batches before with other commercial breweries, and we had our own brewery, but it was our brewery was 40 hectoliters, and Fuller's is 250 hectoliters. So there's a considerable difference in those kinds of breweries. But we were there and we were doing something, and he said, "Hey, you know, all of the brewers, we have a meeting for this collaboration brews that are coming up, and so we have to go. So we're going to be gone for about an hour, and the meeting's going to be about an hour." He said, "But if you could watch the brewery," he says, "if you could clean that kettle, and if you could, watch the brewery, and just take care of anything that comes up, uh, you know, we'll be back in about an hour, hour and a half."
Right.
And I laughed because I thought he was joking.
Yeah.
Because, when you do a collab, people don't put you in charge of their 5-barrel brewery. They don't trust you on that. But he was just like, "Well, just take over here at Fuller's." So I cleaned the kettle, and I did all the things that he wanted to be done. And then I was sitting in the brewer's control room there, and I was just keeping an eye on the numbers and things. And somebody comes and opens the door and leans in and says, 1040. And I'm like,
okay, 1040, yeah.
Or 1043 or whatever it was. I'm like, okay. And just turns and leaves and has no idea that I'm not, one of the brewers there at Fuller's.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this must be the gravity of London Pride, because it has a multi-batching system and multi-kettles. And I'm like, it must be this other batch. And so, I wrote down 1043. I'm like, okay, I'll tell Henry about that when he gets back. And then I'm sitting there kind of nervous, and a tour group comes by, and it's, probably a dozen people, and then the tour guide, and they point at me, and people are taking pictures, and I'm sitting there smiling, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm wearing like a Fuller's high vis vest, and they're taking pictures of me, and so at somewhere on somebody's social media, on somebody's Instagram, is pictures of, hey, look, we went on this tour of Fuller's, and here's a picture of the brewer, in the booth, and it's going to be me. It's not.
That's going to be one of the rarest photos ever.
Yes. if somebody can find one of those pictures somewhere of me at Fuller's in the booth from somebody took from that tour group, I will reward you handsomely. I would love to see that. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest stories like I've ever heard in terms of
right,
American brewers in Fuller's brewing cabin, and got document in the guided tour.
Yes. Yeah, I think the tour guide was like, it must be like a new brewer or something.
The new guy.
Why would they just leave this random guy from California alone in the brewery running everything?
Yeah. Wow.
So there you go.
Yeah. Thanks for the introduce us this story again.
All my best stories and collaborations come with Henry Kirk.
Great.
He's a great guy.
Fuller, right? I mean, the guy that you mentioned is Fuller, right?
He worked at a number of breweries, and he was at Harvey's as well, which is one of my favorites. And then he was at Fuller's, and then Fuller's had bought Dark Star, and they sent Henry to head up Dark Star.
Wow.
And then at Dark Star, Henry's a big champion of some of these classic ales. Fuller's had also bought Gales back in the 60s, I want to say. And Gales had made Prize Old Ale. And when Gales was finally closing down, John Keeling, kind of rescued Prize Old Ale. It had been brewed since 1920, and it had organisms in it that were from King George's time, and these same organisms have been carried forward, 100 years because it was in the wood that they used to mature this prize old ale in. And so John Keelan was very forward thinking. He's like, look, if we don't, rescue these organisms, they're going to get lost. And so he saved that beer and then brewed a new batch and blended it with it. So kind of a Solera thing, and kept carrying those organisms forward as they brewed new ones. Well, it had been, I guess, 11 or so years since they had last brewed it. And a portion of their last batch at Fuller's was still sitting in a stainless tank for 11 years. God. So Henry's like, look, they were going to dump it. He says, don't dump it, put it in a tanker, bring it over to Dark Star. We'll put it in here. We'll save it in a fermenter here, and we'll brew prize old ale. And so he told me about this, and I didn't even wait for an invitation. I said, okay, I'm booking my flights. I'm going to be there. You tell me what day you're brewing it. I'm there. And so I went with my good friend Neil Spake, and we went to Dark Star and helped brew Gale's Prize Old Ale and kind of resurrected it. And it turned out fantastic. And unfortunately, shortly after that, Asahi, who now owns Fuller's, decided that they didn't need Dark Star anymore because they had moved the largest brands from Dark Star to be produced at Fuller's. And then it's just like, okay, we'll just move the rest of the brands over to Meantime, which they also owned. And so Henry wasn't needed anymore. He was made redundant. So lucky for all of us, Henry was made redundant. And that meant that it kind of forced him to go out and start his own brewery, which is called Sunken Knave in Worthing, UK. And so he's already brewed, a few beers, and they just recently had their release party, and I'm really looking forward to it. He has a great interest in doing things like, an old ale, milds, things like that, back in the way they used to be done. So we both have a passion for, how cool the history is of some of these things. When I was there brewing the Goza at Fuller's, I asked Henry if I could look through the Fuller's logbooks, and I flipped to a page 100 years previous to the exact day to see what they were brewing 100 years to the day ago, and took some pictures of that. I said, "Can I post on social media?" He's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And so I got to post on social media. I thought it was really cool. It's cool. Interesting to see what the average person was doing 100 years ago.
Right. They're brewing beer.
Yeah, exactly.
They're brewing beer. Wonderful. I think we've covered quite a lot in this topic, and the last one I want to bring up is a thing that we cannot drop it out with, which is the way, because we know that nowadays in beer world, most people are going to consume the beer via bottles, cans, or on draft in kegs. But English ale, back in the old time, they have their own ways of packaging and serving the beers, which is casks condition and serving on the beer engine, right? So can you talk a little bit about it? Like what does it do? How does it make the serving be the way as it is? And does it have any contribution in terms of the flavor of the beer itself if we compare it to the keg version or bottles? So,
absolutely. It's one of the reasons I say that the hardest thing to replicate is British ales. And one of the reasons I think that it doesn't get quite the respect that it should is because, the Belgian, not all, but a lot of the Belgian beers, will travel well. A lot of the German beers will travel well. And so when you get them in the US or in Thailand or wherever you might be, those actually taste pretty good. They're not aged and spoiled.
Right.
Yet for true British ales, cask conditioned, you
Mhm.
can't just ship a cask somewhere and expect it to turn out the same.
Mhm.
It's quite a delicate product, and it really requires somebody knowledgeable in order to serve it
Mhm.
correctly. So not only is it tough to produce, it's tough to serve, and I think
Right.
that people don't appreciate that. The beers that they get in bottles and cans elsewhere in the world, it has gotten better over time. The packaging quality has gotten better, but
Right.
a lot of them just don't taste as good because they've been shipped warm.
Mhm.
You're just not quite getting the same flavor as you would
Mhm.
that you would in England. So on cask, what's happening there is it's kind of like a keg, but
Mhm.
it's at a much lower carbonation level. And what they do is, they will add a charge of a sugar
Mhm.
that will develop the carbonation, or they will package it, with a little bit of sugar remaining to be fermented,
Mhm.
um, and then they will, maybe add hops to it, fining agent, and then they'll bung it up. They will seal it up. They'll
Right.
hold it at the brewery for, however long it takes, a week or so, to carbonate up or fully condition, maybe even 2 weeks. And then they will send that out to the pubs. Now, the
Mhm.
pubs need somebody who really knows their cellar work. These casks, once they get them, that's not done yet. They
Mhm.
have to put them up in racks. They have to let them settle, and then they put in a spile that allows the carbonation to kind of equalize.
Right.
Sometimes the casks are too lively, too much carbonation. The carbonation needs to be absolutely perfect,
Mhm.
and then they will tap these, and then it gets pumped up to the bar. The beer tends to be stored in the cellars, where it's cooler than up in the bar,
Mhm.
around 10 degrees C, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the beer engine, what it does is it's a pump, and it will
Right.
pump the beer up from the cellar to the
Right.
glass.
Right.
And in the picture there, you can see the swan neck, which
Yeah, the
the
one that's dropped
filler.
down.
Yes,
Mhm.
it goes to the bottom of the glass.
Right.
Um, and then on that one in the picture, it has a sparkler on the end. And the sparkler, what it does, it has little holes in the bottom. Uh,
Right.
they can be of different sizes and different number of holes, and
Mhm.
that determines the breakout of the CO2. And
Right.
what they'll do, you've obviously seen like Guinness be poured,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
served on nitrogen, and you see
Right.
the cascading bubbles.
Right.
Well, the same thing happens with this.
Mhm.
The serving on nitrogen is just a way to get around from having to do, a beer engine,
Right.
because a beer engine is much slower, and a
Mhm.
beer engine takes, muscles,
Right.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and so uh, it's not as conducive to high speed service.
Right.
People talk about, oh, Belgian beers, you've got to wait, you got to be patient. The
Mhm.
foam, and then they'll cut the foam off, and then they'll top it up for you, and all this.
Right.
Well, the same thing is true of the British cask ale. With the beer engine, this modern technology of the beer engine,
Mhm.
because casks before, they would just put the cask on the bar, they tap it, and just gravity dispense like they do in Dusseldorf.
Right. Mhm.
Um, you pump the beer engine, and you force the liquid through these tiny holes. It causes the cascading effect in the glass. It develops a beautiful head,
Mhm.
and it just just a super easy to drink pint of ale.
Right. Right. So when you go into the pub in UK, you can kind of see this hand pump handle, the hand pull, right, and this swan neck
Right.
and the sparkler that you mentioned, and like what you said, the guy behind the bar gonna have to take time pumping 3-4 times to get you a full pint of beer.
Mhm.
And one thing I probably not sure whether it is a misconception, because people may say that English ale's got to be served warm, flat, and has very, very low head. Is that the things that's like a, a myth, or is it true?
Well, it's not, frozen cold like, some American beers
Hmm.
are.
Right.
It's not, super gassy like some Belgian beers are.
Hmm.
10 degrees C is actually quite a cool temperature
Right.
as you're drinking. It is warmer than certain other beers, but even
Hmm.
German beers, they want served around, 8 or
Right.
7. They don't really want any colder than that. So
Hmm.
it's not that much of a change. And then gas wise, yes, I would say it's considerably lower. It still has plenty of carbonation, so it
Right.
tends to be around 1.7 uh, volumes of CO2,
Hmm.
1.5. Some of them are lower, 1.12 or
Hmm.
1.2. But yeah, it's not like a gassy. And me personally, I find
Hmm.
a lower carbonated beer easier to drink than
Right.
a gassy one. Do I want to
Hmm.
fill my stomach up with gas, or do I want to
Yeah.
fill my stomach up with beer? I
Right.
prefer beer.
So it's not flat. It's just
No,
lower in carbonation level.
right? Yeah,
Right.
you wouldn't get ahead on it if there was no carbonation.
Hmm. Hmm. But I understand that if you serve it a little bit warmer, relatively to like 5-6 degrees C's, in certain beer style, it's gonna open up more
Yes,
flavor as well, right? Hmm.
right. People don't think it matters that much, but if you try drinking a beer at 5 degrees C
Hmm.
versus 10, it's
Right.
a huge difference in flavor. Just a
Yeah.
few degrees C makes a big difference. And like we were talking about at the start of the show, British ales are all about these rich flavors,
Hmm.
and the colder it is, the less you taste these flavors. So
Right.
you want it to be a little bit warmer to open up, um, develop those flavors.
Hmm. Yeah, and the lower carbonation level not only gonna fill up your stomach, but also gonna contribute to a different kind of mouthfeel as well.
Mhm. That
Yeah.
changes the mouthfeel. It doesn't necessarily develop more mouthfeel, but it changes the mouthfeel.
Mhm.
And also an acidic bite. And
All right.
acidic bites, the carbonic acid can
Mhm.
actually detract from the maltiness that you can
Right.
get in a lot of these British ales.
Mhm. All right, that's great. That's wonderful. So to sum up, the last one is just a quick one. If you're gonna have to just sell me one beer from UK that's considered to be an English ale, what would be the one that you proudly to present the most?
You should know you by now, and I have no quick,
Right.
no
Right.
quick answers.
Right.
Um, you know, the probably if I had only one beer to drink,
Hmm.
forever, it would
Right.
probably be Harvey's Sussex Best Bitter. It's
Sussex
got
best better.
it's got the complexity,
Hmm.
flavor complexity,
Right.
um, but it's just super easy to drink. It's not boring. It's hoppy and it's malty and it's got fermentation character to it. Yet
Yeah.
it's easy drinking. You can drink pint after pint of it. So it'd probably be that. But I have
Mhm.
to say, there's so many great beers in England.
True.
Things like Timothy Taylor's Landlord.
Mhm.
That's a great beer. I enjoy that. Although a lot of people know that, but they don't know Boltmaker. And
Yeah.
Boltmaker is actually I prefer Boltmaker over Landlord.
Landlord. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I mentioned Holden's earlier with their best bitter or their bitter.
Hmm.
Um, And it's just crackingly bitter, but just so easy to drink. It's
Right.
the last pint I had of it, I was just stunned because in the United States and especially in California, we make some really bitter beers,
Right.
but they are not as easy to drink. The bitterness, lasts on your tongue too long and ends
Right.
up, you know, it just becomes cloying.
Distracting.
It becomes
Mhm.
heavy. It
All
becomes
right.
overwhelming.
Okay.
Whereas the Holden's bitter, it's just this sharp bitterness, but gentle on your tongue. You
Mhm.
could just drink pints and pints and pints of it. I'm going
Right.
back again in March.
Okay.
I've got to have more. Um, also same area. You go with the Sarah Hughes Ruby Mild at the
Hmm.
Beacon Hotel.
Right.
Tremendous, rich, uh, uh, you know, um, just luscious, beautiful, dark mild.
Hmm.
You go to Hook Norton, get
Hmm.
yourself a pint of Hooky, or
Okay.
so many of the other beers. They were the same, same built the same year as Harvey's, another
Ah,
vertical, same architect.
right.
Really cool. You go to Batham's out there. Um, you go to uh, let's see. I talked about Timothy Taylor's. You go
Right.
to Theakston's, a
Fixed.
little bit north of York, out there, Massam,
Hmm.
and Theakston's with their Old Peculiar. Yeah, I mean that's just amazing. It's just the fermentation character and the rich malt character of that. They've been brewing that for God knows how long. Um,
Right.
you go to yeah, Adnams. Again, great beers as well. They're the multi-strain yeast culture. You go to oh boy, who am I leaving out? There's so many great breweries with such great character. Um, so yeah, you really can't go wrong. There's
Right.
too many of them. If somebody says they have a favorite,
Hmm.
British ale, I
Hmm.
gotta agree with them because it's probably going to be great. You know,
Right. You
uh,
got like tons of it.
yes, I've got I got a soft spot in my heart for Harvey's,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that and even then, I love their old ale. I love their so many of their other beers. They have so many great beers.
Hmm.
Fuller still has some great beers.
Hmm.
Even though they're more corporately owned now.
Right. Right.
um, it's still some great beers there. There's just so many. And then there's a lot of small brewers in the UK that have started up
Mhm.
the craft beer movement,
Right.
and they're making some amazing stuff too. And
Mhm.
so it is just a country rich in breweries and great people and great pubs to drink it all in.
Mhm.
This is why you got to go.
Yeah.
Forget your next trip to the US. Just go to the UK with me. We'll have a wonderful time.
I bet. I bet. But it seems like you can start up, the UK breweries tour company and by
There's
yourself.
people who do that already, but
Okay.
yeah, people ask me, it's like, okay, where do I go?
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
but yeah, I love it. You really can't go wrong. You could land yourself anywhere in the UK,
Hmm.
and that includes Scotland, um
Right.
you know
Island.
and anywhere on the island. Wales is amazing too. Brains is a huge favorite of mine.
Hmm.
There's nothing like having some brains. Um, uh, in Cardiff,
Cardiff.
and they
Yeah.
have some amazing beers as well. It's just it's it's stunning to me how much great beer there is in that country. California has a lot of breweries. We got 1,000 breweries in California,
Right.
and it is you know like twice the length of the UK, or so the space between breweries in California is huge. There's a lot of good ones, but it's not that easy to get around to a bunch of breweries. In the UK, yeah, I mean, you could pretty much walk from brewery to brewery and not, and have amazing, you could probably go to 1,000 breweries in the UK and have an amazing experience. So I urge everybody that's in the slightest interested in it, you should check it out and support the historic family brewers and those styles of beers and cask ale, real ale. Because if we don't support it, it's going to disappear. It's it's an expensive way to make beer. Having multi-cultures and dealing with all this and buying only the best ingredients and using antiquated equipment to produce these things, and to fill these casks. There's a lot of labor in using cask as a package. If we don't support it, one of the great art forms in the world is going to go away. It's going to be very, very sad. And I'll have told you all so. And it'll be everybody's fault that you didn't go and drink more cask ale in England.
So I think it is the great sum up, because it's a perfect moment, because the more we talk about it, the more I want to have English ale. Too bad that it's just kind of rare to find one here, so I probably have to fire the kettle and try to get ones around here soon.
Open ferment.
Open ferment. We'll try that. We'll try that. All right, so we are clocking at an hour mark, and it is about time to close the session. So Jamil, thank you so much for coming out to our platform and become our guest speaker. We appreciate it a lot, and hope you can join the platform again in future sessions. I think we have more to talk about, maybe after you came back from UK and share us more about the story there.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you asked me to join.
Yeah, thank you very much, and take care.
Take care, brother.
Take care. Bye bye. ขอบคุณครับ